A quick reminder before we begin the episode. If you haven't rated and reviewed our podcast yet, please consider doing it now. It only takes a second and makes a huge difference to us. With that being said, on with the show.
All events depicted in this podcast are real. However, the names, locations, and some details have been changed for the privacy of those involved.
Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 4 of Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire, a podcast that above all things is about family.
Yeah, so Dad called me randomly, and at first I actually hung up by accident. And I was like, oh shit. And like I haven't, because it's been so long, I was like, fuck, he probably thinks that I'm hanging up on him. But
It had been a while since I last spoke to Dad. About a year ago, he decided to miss my wedding without much of an excuse, and it put a dent in the relationship. That was the last time we spoke, and it was over the phone. I don't hate the guy or anything like that. I just don't make time for him the way I used to. I'm sure all this will come up in another episode.
Yeah, he sounded fine. He told me the history of the place that he's got. Yeah, in the crazy...
Yeah, the mining town.
Yeah, the crazy opal mining town. Yeah, well, he gave me the history of the house.
Recently, Dad gave away almost all of his earthly possessions and acquired a plot of land in an out-of-the-way opal mining town where he hopes to work the land, find some opals, and make his fortune. This sounds awesome, right? Like a modern-day retelling of some Western film starring a grizzled Australian Clint Eastwood. The realities of the story aren't quite so glamorous. When I say that he gave away almost all of his earthly possessions, that looks less like a man freeing himself from the shackles of society, and more like a 67-year-old man recently recovering from major surgery, having a late life crisis, and giving away around $900,000 worth of property and possessions. And by acquiring a plot of land in an out-of-the-way opal mining town to find his fortune, what I really mean is to spend whatever money he did keep for himself to lease some land in an area so secluded that the nearest decent grocery store is 3.5 hours drive away.
And he said, and so...
Don't want to forget milk.
He said, it's just 3.5 hours away, so I can get whatever I need. It's not that far away.
Just 3.5. Just...
While I do think Dad's choices over the last few years have been stupid, and they really are just incredibly stupid, I can't argue with the fact that they are kind of cool. He's basically on a treasure hunt. Even the shack he lives in is rumoured to have a hidden treasure in its walls.
Hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars worth of opals stashed, but they couldn't find it. But they ripped down all the walls in their house, and then when they couldn't find anything, they finally sold the house off. And then the people that were in the house before him...
What do you think?
Sold him the...
Sounds like a good topic for a podcast, right? I thought so too, but not this podcast. Maybe later, after Dad strikes it rich, then I'll tackle that one. Strangely enough, though, there was another story that Dad told me from his crazy opal mining town while we were on the phone. It was about an eccentric local man who built a stone castle in the middle of nowhere.
A castle? It's a small castle in terms of how big actual castles are, but it's still huge. And so people go and visit and pay an admission fee. But not long ago, like a month or two ago, they found this murdered Aboriginal woman, like within a ways of the town, and then no one sort of knew who did it. But then all of a sudden they somehow found a link to this guy who owns this castle, and then he's in jail now, and there's talk around the town that this guy may actually be a serial killer. And they're talking whether this is just rumor or true, but there's talk that they're going to actually get a warrant on the castle and go in there, because there's all these rumors going around that he was killing people and putting their bodies inside the walls of this castle.
What the fuck?
Which is so cool. Like I heard it.
Disturbia stuff.
I heard it and I was like, man, I have to make a trip to go up there because I love true crime, and that is a great podcast right there.
It's pretty cool.
So here's my dream. Here's what will happen if the stars align perfectly for me. Number 1, Dad and I will mend our broken relationship. Number 2, Dad will find the hidden $1 million cache of opals on his property. And number 3, while I'm recording the podcast about number 1 and number 2, the police in Opaltown will give me full access to the Murder Castle files, so I can record the episode about that at the same time. But we're not there yet. The episode today is about a murder though. It's about the murder of a relationship.
When was the last time you remember the parents being affectionate to each other?
I don't know. I've got no real memories of mum and dad ever being affectionate to each other.
To be honest, when I remember them being affectionate was when we lived in the fishing village. And I think it might have been just a hug or something, like it wasn't anything, like...
I don't remember them kissing ever.
No, I don't ever remember that. I never remember them doing that. I remember them hugging every now and then, but even that was quite rare.
Like at parties and stuff in front of other people, they might have had a couple of drinks and been a little bit more affectionate, but then
I don't remember them functioning at parties, to be honest.
when everyone left, they'd probably start arguing, so that didn't last long.
Like, did they function as a couple? That's
Not really.
Hmm.
They argued all the time. Like, there'd be times where we'd go out to dinner and then have an argument at dinner, and then mum would start walking home, and then dad would be driving beside her on the road telling her to get the F in the car and stop embarrassing.
I remember that.
Like, and I remember that happened a few times.
Yes.
And we used to go on these ridiculously long car trips
Yeah.
for holidays.
Yeah.
And they hated to be around each other for that amount of time. And they just argue the whole time. Like, why? Why would you not just pay the money and take a flight so it's an hour rather than 7 hours of hell with us in the back seat trying to, like, I don't know, sleep the majority of the way because they were just bickering the whole time.
Why do I find this so funny?
There's a long and painful tradition of nightmare car rides in our family, but of all the nightmare car rides, there is one that always stands out in my memory.
Do you remember the car ride with the wombat?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I have this memory, but I always worry that it's not real. I picked it up from a movie or something because it's just too bizarre. I remember we were driving somewhere. I don't know. Do you remember where we were driving?
I don't remember where we were driving to. I know it was a long car trip, but because Dad used to love to drive everywhere, and he always used to drive either like really early in the morning or he used to like to drive at night.
He couldn't do anything without making it some kind of test of manhood or a physical challenge or something. So if he was driving somewhere, it would have to be the world's longest car ride, or you'd have to get up earlier than any human had ever gotten up for a trip before. Like, nothing was ever easy with him. And it wasn't enough that he was making a challenge for himself. He had to bring us all along for the ride.
Yeah. So anyway, I know I was asleep.
Yeah.
Were you at the front or the back?
I was in the back middle. It's where I always sat because I would lean forward and look through the window and keep Dad company while he was driving. And you and Mum were both asleep because it was like 3 a.m. in the morning. It was an ungodly hour. We were coming home from this trip. And you always were asleep because you got really bad car sickness. So any long trip, you looked like death.
Yes. But then all of a sudden there's this massive, like the cars just, like you could feel it hit something.
Well, it was peaceful. Like, it was at nighttime. It's just a peaceful road, just darkness. And then all of a sudden, I'm leaning forward and I just see something jump in front of the car, and it's massive. And Dad didn't have time to do anything. Like, I think he maybe tried to swerve, but he just hit this thing dead on. And it was a massive collision. And as the car went over the top of it, as it was in its death throes under the car, you could feel it clawing at your feet underneath, like something out of the Twilight Zone. And then Dad pulls over to the side of the road, and already the car sounds like shit. Like, you can tell that the engine was messed up. And he pulled over and stopped the car, and it's pretty quiet. And then he opens up the car door and gets out, and it's really exciting. It's like a horror movie or something. And then I'm really excited, so I get out because I want to be part of it. And then walks down to the back of the car, and it's dark. It's at night time, so I'm sort of walking, catching up with him because I'm a little bit scared. And there's this dead wombat, and it's massive, and it's lying on its back, and its legs are sticking up in the air, and its tongue's hanging out of the side of its mouth.
They do. Like, if you see them on the side of the road, they're always lying on the back and their little feet are up at the, they're just pointing up. Do you know what I mean? Like,
That's exactly what it was like.
They must be super top heavy, like, because they're pure muscle. Like,
Oh my God.
when they die, it's like the standard.
They just capsize.
Yeah.
So Dad inspects this dead wombat, then he drags it off to the side of the road so it's not a hazard. And then he goes back and inspects the front of the car, and the front of the car is a mess. I'm sure you remember how bad it was.
Yeah, like the radiators at the front, and the whole front was pushed in. Like, it was really bad.
Yeah, and so after he inspected that, he walked around, got back inside the car again, and started the engine.
And you could see him, he was sort of listening because he's a capable mechanic. And he revved the engine a few times, and he could tell that the car was done. It was in real bad shape. And then he stopped the car. He sat there, and it was at this point that Mum, who'd been asleep for the whole thing, decided to pipe in. And so she started just harping on him. So with the, why were you driving so fast? What were you doing? Like this sort of thing. And then Dad, who to that point had been quite calm, just pops the car door open, storms around to the back, and just starts kicking this shit out of this dead wombat. and I was in the back seat looking out the back window and just saw him like laying boots into this this dead creature. Yeah. And I'm sure the whole time he was just imagining that it was Mum. This car ride shows a common example of how the parents would interact with each other. Mum would have some kind of a dig at Dad, and then he would snap back at her. This would inevitably escalate, which would lead to some kind of extreme gesture, like Dad smashing a dinner plate against a wall, or Mum storming out of a restaurant and refusing to get in the car, or Dad beating a dead marsupial on the side of the highway. That last example is a bit strange. And I want to make one thing clear. While these escalations sometimes did become physical, Dad was never physically abusive to Mum or us kids. And it wasn't even something we were worried about. I do remember Mum hitting Dad a few times, but if Dad was going to beat someone, it would be someone who threatened our family, and it would never be a woman. But as commonplace as it was to see the parents undermine each other, there was one area where they always had each other's back.
When I was younger, my room was untidy for some reason, and Mum was always such a stickler for my room being tidy. And I think we were having an argument or something beforehand, and then she went, "Your room's not tidy, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "It's only a fucking room." Like that to her, and she went off her head. And then so when I don't know whether Dad was there, I don't think when he came home I got in big trouble, like you don't speak to your mother like that, that's ridiculous, you do, no, like he just went off his head. And of course I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. When you're freaking out, you're like, I'm so gonna get a smack.
I think that's maybe when they functioned the best as a couple, was when they were against us kids. Like if I said something derogatory about Mum, Dad would shoot it down straight away, and vice versa. We talk a lot about when do we remember them being affectionate, or did they ever love each other? And I think there's a lot of things to base a relationship on. And I think they based theirs on raising us kids. They were really good at setting rules and making structures and making sure they were followed. So when I say against us kids, I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. I think they did for the most part, did a good job raising us. The problem was the times that they didn't have enough energy to deal with each other as well as back each other against us kids. After recording this conversation with Ellie, I found myself coming back to it again and again. There was something about the idea of energy playing a role in the way the parents would function that resonated with me. It became a bit of an obsession, like a puzzle teasing to be solved. If I could put all the pieces together just right, then all the strange behavior might make sense. I took some days in my office pondering the idea. Energy. What part did the parents' energy levels play in all this? And how does it all connect? Finally, after filling a notebook with scribbled pages, I emerged from my cave with a theory that I was confident about. It took the form of a simple line graph with dot points and notes indicating important examples from our childhood. This was my opus, and it was something I was confident we could use as a reference tool moving forward. I organised a group chat with the siblings to go over my findings. Oh man, I'm so glad I finally got you on this conference call. I've been waiting to show you this for ages. So did you bring in the study notes?
Right, the study note. I got the notes.
Okay.
Yeah. What are we talking about?
I mean, the study notes. I sent them a week ago. You didn't print them or anything?
Oh, I can print it out now.
I mean, I don't really want to wait for you to print it out right now.
Sorry, now I know what you're talking about. I didn't realise I had to study. Fuck this, man.
Well, I wasn't asking you to study. Just, do you have the notes?
I'm looking for them. I'm sure they're here somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. Okay.
Did you send it in the group? Did you send it in the group chat, or was it?
Oh God.
It's literally just above the wolf spider.
I mean, are we gonna do this today? Do you actually have it?
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay, fuck me.
Okay. What?
When your fucking charts and shit.
What about you, Aria? Do you have it at least?
Yeah, I'm printing it while I'm waiting for the L to figure it out.
Clearly, the siblings didn't take the group chat as seriously as I would have hoped. But once the study notes had been found and printed, I was confident my enthusiastic presentation would win them over. I'll just go through it, and then if you get lost anywhere or have any questions, don't be shy. Just ask me any questions. I'm happy to go through anything. I just want to make sure that you guys all understand everything.
Okay, Mr. Shaw.
Okay. All right. Fuck that. I changed my mind. No questions till the end. Just shut up and listen. So just have a look at the sheet. So you'll see at the top of the graph, it's a graph of Dad's energy level. And that's what I found was the important part. Not their energy as a couple, but Dad's energy. Anyway, I'll come back to that. But if you look at the curve on there, so you'll see the curve is a, what are those curves called? It's a,
Like a mountain curve?
No, it's not a mountain. What the hell is a mountain curve? It's a bell curve. That's what it is. Yeah, and if you follow the bell curve, so to the left is when Dad had low energy, and to the right is when Dad had high energy. And you'll see their peak performance is right in the middle at the peak where everything was going the best for them, was when...
It is a mountain curve.
It's not a mountain curve. No one's even ever heard of a mountain curve. Why do you think it's a mountain curve?
I don't know, I found one that said mountain curve versus the bell curve.
So you're looking up mountain curves rather than listening to what I'm saying.
Bell curve sort of goes up and down, whereas this is just a mountain curve. Look at me.
I'm pretty sure that's not right. I'm pretty sure it's a bell curve.
No, bell curves are the ones that like have a little lead up and then go down. Like it's not a perfect up and down like this mountain. This is a mountain curve.
Who cares? It's a curve. Let's move on.
In the end, no one gave a shit what kind of curve it was. Nor did they care how I was able to chart it on a graph, or link it to the interactions between the parents' energy. But we're content with a simple summary that goes something like this. The quality of the parents' decision-making, parenting, pretty much everything can be split into 3 phases. The improving phase, the peak performance phase, and the declining phase. The improving phase starts at the beginning of the relationship and ends at the middle with the peak performance phase. It is a period of steady improvement. The phase starts with negative events like Kara leaving home at 15 years old, and the big red undies, and Dad beating Ellie's school teacher, but ends with some positive events, like leaving the dead-end fishing village for the boom surfing town. The peak performance phase starts a few years after this move, when the parents paid off the family home and bought a high-quality second home. This phase saw an influx of saving, good quality parenting, and even a month-long world holiday. During this phase, arguments were at an all-time low. But of course, this couldn't last, and the peak performance phase concludes with the final declining phase. This phase starts with high performance, decreasing progressively until the inevitable destruction of the marriage. It is the events of this phase that we will focus on moving forward. I think I missed a lot of the declining phase of the parents' relationship because I was living overseas and I had to come back periodically to renew my visa, so I get these snapshots of things progressively getting worse. Probably one of the first things that I did notice that was a bit off was your and Mum's relationship. It wasn't quite right. It was sort of like as her attention went away from Dad, she kind of focused on you, but there was definitely something off about it that used to freak me out a little bit.
No, we did. We had an abnormally close relationship. Like it was too close because she used to say that like, you know, I was like a little doll and she loved dressing me up when I was younger, and then she wished that I was a baby again because she just loved looking after me. Like I was just this perfect thing to her. And then as I got older, I guess all that slowly faded away, but she held on to it for a very long time and sort of isolated me.
Yeah, because I remember Dad wasn't sleeping with Mum anymore. Dad would sleep in your bed and you would sleep with Mum. And I thought that was really strange. And it just seemed like you were there for years. Like how long did you sleep in the same bed as Mum for?
Periodically, probably from when I was 5 till I was about 10, I guess.
Yeah, that's so weird.
It got to the point where I was getting too old to be sleeping with Mum in bed. So we ended up getting a bunk bed. So Dad and I slept in a bunk bed, like bunk bed buddies.
That's great. You went from sleeping with your mum to being bunk buddies with your dad. I hope you got the top bunk at least anyway.
The bottom bunk was a futon. So Dad slept on the futon on the bottom bunk, and I slept on the top bunk.
Yeah, because I was away for a lot of this, so I'm just getting the details now. But there's more. There's more just things that I didn't know about.
I mean, Mum and I were still taking baths together when I was like 12 years old and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked.
Like, I used to shave her legs for her.
Oh, what?
Like, yeah, I
Oh,
know.
man.
I know.
Jesus
Looking back,
Christ.
I'm like, what the hell?
Man, that is
Like,
fucked up. That's
Yeah, it is really bad. I don't like to think about it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to think about it either.
Yeah, well, geez, at least you don't have the memory.
Oh God, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's real bad.
It is really bad.
That's real bad. Next topic, please. I have no desire to spend any more time thinking about the bath and grooming habits of Mum and Aria than I have to. But I will say this. At no point in the parents' relationship prior to this would Dad have put up with this. Sleeping in a separate bed to his wife? No way. Sharing bunk beds with his daughter? Definitely not. Disturbing bath time habits going on in their house right under his nose? No chance. But this is what the poor parenting decisions look like in the declining phase of the relationship. It was Dad seeming to give up on trying, like all the years of arguing with Mum had sucked all his mojo away, and he just didn't care anymore. And as only Mum could, she took full advantage of Dad's lack of attention by joining a cult.
Of course, Mum would join a cult.
Yeah, well, it was a cult. They called it an affirmative action group, but it was a cult. It was these divorced harpies who blamed all of the miseries in their life on their ex-husband, and their biggest goal in life was to get everybody else to get divorced as well so they could be as miserable as them. They were horrible women. I don't even know how Mum found them. She certainly wasn't on the internet. She must have been...
The next door neighbour got her into it.
Of course it was that psychopath. Of course they found each other. That's a match made in hell right there. And yeah, it does make sense because we could always hear them next door, right?
I remember hearing them because I used to do the meetings next door, and I could hear them screaming and stuff and like laughing. I don't know. There was some weird stuff going on with that thing.
I'll never know for sure what was going on inside these cult meetings. From the manic sounds that came across our fence, it didn't sound like anything good. But I do know the impact that it had on Mum and on Mum and Dad's relationship. When Mum started to refer to the group organizer as her guru, that's when...
Yeah, that's not culty at all.
Yeah, I know, right? That's when Dad was really... That was the end for him. He had no presence in the house anymore. He'd come home from work, he'd go to the shed, he'd drink beers, he might shoot inside to have a shower, but then straight back outside again. And if he did come inside, Mum would be very unpleasant to him and kind of run him out the door, where he would stay for the rest of the night until he would slink back inside to play bunk beds with his daughter. What a life, right? To confuse things further, it was during this time that Ellie came home from living overseas with Bruce, her future husband.
I actually was deported from England. That was the time. So I think I came back for a wedding. Me and Bruce had applied for a visa over there, and it was rejected. I had been asking when I was over here, if it was okay to go back, was there any issues? No, you're fine. When I get over there, they're like, no, this has been rejected. We need to find out why it was rejected. You can't come in. So then they put me on a plane and actually sent me straight back to Australia. So anyway, I get back, ring her and say, hey, hi, Mum, can I come and stay with you? Just because I've got nowhere else to go, kind of thing. Like, I won't be a problem. You won't even know I'm there, kind of thing. Her response to that was, no, Aria's got exams and you can't stay. And I was like pretty shocked because I'd just been kind of deported from another country, and I had nowhere to go. So I was kind of like, okay, this is great. So I literally am homeless.
But as it turned out, homelessness wasn't an affliction that Ellie would be facing alone. And just before her rejection from Mum had passed on another rejection to Dad and downgraded his status from bunk beds to trailer park.
So after I'd rang Mum, I'd rang Dad and was like, hey, Dad, told him the situation, and he's like, I'm living in a caravan, just there's me in this caravan kind of thing, so I don't think there's enough room.
I don't know, like Dad was deluded at this point. It hurts my brain to think of the mental gymnastics that he had to go through to get to whatever headspace he was in, because I think in his head he still believed that he was in some position of power. He'd say things all the time like, I I hope your mum knows what she's doing. I hope she realizes that at some point I'm not going to come back. And it's like, man, at some point you're not going to come back. What are you talking about? You've been 100% gimped. You're living in a caravan. You don't even have enough power in the relationship to stick up for your daughter who's deported. Like, that's crazy. I mean, what do you need? What does it take for you to realize that you're done? You're in the end game, my friend. What is it going to take for you to realize? What would it take for Dad to realize the marriage was over? And what would Mum have to do to convince him not to come back? That is a good question. And it's a question that I was about to find out the answer to. So me being the golden child, I was staying with Mum and working with Dad while I was back in the country renewing my visa before I went back overseas again. So Dad drives me home after we finish work and he stops on the side of the road to drop me off, and then I notice that his eyes are focused on something over my shoulder towards the house. And before I can say anything, he opens the car door and runs around the front of the car towards the house. So I turn around to look to see what's caught his attention. And then I see in the driveway where his car used to be parked when he lived there, I just see a pile of what looks like garbage. I get out of the car to walk over to see what it is. As I'm walking over, he's gone over to the front door and he starts bashing on the front door. And then I look at the pile of garbage and I realize it's a bunch of clothes and records and tools and things. And I realize that what it is it's all of Dad's stuff. Mum's just thrown it out onto the driveway. Anyway, he's bashing on the front door and then Mum opens up and Dad's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why is my stuff out in the driveway? And Mum doesn't come back at him angry. She comes back with this smug kind of repetitive thing where she just keeps saying, get your things off my property. I need you to get your things off my property. And the more angry Dad gets, the more he sort of gets elevated, the more she just keeps repeating, I need you to get your things off my property. And one of the things that he said was, you don't need to throw my things in the driveway. You could have called me and I would have come and got everything and left. You didn't have to do this. And then the answer, of course, was, this is my property. You need to get your things and get off my property. And I just can't explain how infuriating it is. I know that I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I would have put a fist through a window or something. It would have made me so angry. But Dad, I think he realized that he couldn't argue the point anymore, so he stopped trying, and then he just said, I hope you realize that that's it, you've gone too far now, I'm not coming back after this. And then Mum responded to that with, give me your keys. And Dad said, what? And she said, give me the keys, they're my keys, this is my house, give me those keys, they're mine. And Dad said, no, this is my house as well. I paid for this. This is my house. I'm not giving you the keys. And she said, give them to me. They're mine. It's my property. Give them to me. And he said, I will never give you those keys. Dad's proclamation that she would never get his keys had the feeling of a gauntlet being laid down. This was the line that couldn't be crossed. Take my bed, take my pride, put me in a trailer park, but you will not take my keys, and you will never take my house. And the statement did have some weight, because after he spoke those words, they were both quiet, and he collected his stuff and left, leaving just me and Mum and awkwardness. So Dad had just driven off, and it was just me and Mum left standing on the stoop. And then Mum said, I'm really excited to go to the affirmative action group tomorrow because I'm the last one left. And I said, the last one left? What does that mean? And then she gestured to the space on the driveway where Dad had picked up all his stuff. And she said, I'm the last one in the group left to do that. Having been the sole witness of the driveway offensive, it was apparent to me from this point on that the marriage would come to an end. But the parents always kept their cards close to their chest, and the separation wouldn't become public knowledge until about a month later, on a date of Mum's choosing.
It was your birthday.
Yep, it was on my birthday, and it was really unexpected because Mum and Dad had been split up for about a month. They barely talked to each other, and then Mum said, "Oh, you should invite some people over for your birthday." And I said, "Yeah, cool, sounds fun." And then she said, "I'll invite Dad." And everything about it felt like a trap.
It was Mum, Dad, you and I.
And Eli was there and a couple other people that I'd gone to school with, so just a few of us there.
And we were down in like the outside shed area and we had a barbecue.
So Dad was cooking the barbecue. And this is important because leading up to the day, Mum kept saying, Dad's going to come over and I'm going to get Dad to cook the barbecue. And when Dad arrived, She did. She kind of thrust on him. She said, go on, cook the barbecue, get the barbecue out. I don't know if it's some weird control thing, but for some reason, she wanted him behind that grill.
We were just chatting like normal, and then all of a sudden,
Smash, all these glass shards flying out and hitting into everyone's feet.
Mum smashes her glass of wine on the ground.
It was like a terrorist attack. She threw it between everyone's feet, so it exploded, so everyone copped a spray of this wine.
And starts screaming at Dad.
And this wasn't like the driveway offensive. This wasn't like, you get off my property, you get off my property. This was venomous. She was like, you get out of here now. You aren't welcome here. Like crazy. And she's walking towards Dad, pointing as she's saying it. And all you can see is people running in fear, sliding across the wine, trying to get out of her way. All of this behavior was extreme. But breakups are extreme things. The thing that made it worse was that it all felt so premeditated. From the time that the partygoers arrived until the Chardonnay Molotov cocktail hit the concrete was less than 10 minutes. The ground beef in the centre of the sausages on the grill was still pink when the guests crashed out the side gate of the house. And I think this is what Mum wanted. She wanted an audience to see her dominate her victim. And I'm certain that she visualised the full wine glass leaving her hand, just like she had visualised angry words over a steaming hot plate for dramatic effect. They say that when people are in extreme situations, like hostage situations and things like that, they become hyper-focused and time slows down and they can recall little details and things that they normally wouldn't have. And I feel like I had a bit of that going on in this situation. There's things that I shouldn't recall that I do. Like we had this chihuahua called Bjorn that we all adored. And like all chihuahuas, it would take any opportunity it could to act tougher than it actually was. And so when everyone was falling over themselves to get away from Mum, that's when Bjorn jumped into action and started barking at everyone and nipping at their feet. And the thing that I remember really specifically is that Eli, who was always a tough guy, he was petrified of Bjorn in this situation, and Bjorn was taking full advantage, nipping at his feet, and he was kicking and falling over himself trying to get out the gate. It was really funny. Another thing that I remember is that Mum had a little blanket over her shoulders before she threw the glass. And then when she stood up to go on a rampage, yelling and pointing at Dad, she flicked the blanket off her shoulders and it sort of fell down and landed on the ground behind the chair. But the thing that I remember the most, the thing that's the most clear of all the memories that I have, is of Aria. There was this split second of silence between the glass smashing and Mum going on a rampage before anyone could react to anything. And in that split second of silence, I remember Aria started crying. And I remember it really affected me because it was so quick. Before anybody else reacted, she was already in tears. And I remember thinking, wow, she's really sensitive to this stuff. And so my primary thought in that moment was, all right, first of all, you have to protect Aria, and then you can deal with everything else. After the initial shock of the verbal attack from Mum, Dad fired back with a verbal attack of his own, and as their insults and ridicules increased in pace and in volume, sentences no longer became decipherable over the yelling. Rather, an odd word here or there could be made out. To shield Aria from this display, I took her further down the yard, to our chook pen. My hope was that the chickens would distract her while I found a way to separate the parents.
Yeah, I remember holding a chicken and patting it and crying and patting it.
Only you, Aria, have that special relationship with the chicken.
What? I loved the chickens. I was obsessed.
Clearly you were. And you must have seen better because I then decided to go back up to the war zone. And I think when I was walking up there, I had this idea that I was going to be like, all right, guys, Aria's upset. Let's act like adults and calm down a little bit. Let's take it down a notch. But when I got there, it was so intense and the rage was so visceral that it stopped me at the peripheral. And all I did was stand there with my eyes wide open and my mouth ajar. And I just had my hands kind of facing with my palms down, and I just did that like, whoa, calm down, whoa. That's all I could do.
Like a horse.
Yeah.
Like bucking violently.
That's exactly what it was like. But it didn't do anything. I don't even think they noticed me there. And it was certainly through no effect of mine that Mum got sick of the argument and then stormed off. And Dad looked at me like he'd just noticed that I was there, and he just said, I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry for doing that on your birthday. I'm really sorry. And I was like, it's cool, man. It's all good. Don't worry about it. And he's like, no, I'm really sorry. And then I remember he was still standing over the barbecue and the sausages were still on there.
and he kind of looked at a sausage. I think he actually was thinking about handing me a sausage as a peace offering or something. Kind of like a happy birthday, here's a sausage. But he didn't. I guess in those moments, your brain isn't working at full capacity, so you're not really sure what to do. But he just said, again, I'm really sorry, mate. I'm sorry about that. And then he left.
Classic Dad.
Yeah.
Here's a sausage. This will make it all better.
Yeah, well, I did eat the sausage after he left. I grabbed a sausage and ate it. But then, because when Mum left, I thought that she'd gone up to the house.
But Mum was actually down the backyard talking to me.
Which means it kind of had the opposite effect from what I wanted.
Yeah, she came down the backyard and I had the chicken in my arms and I'd calmed down a little bit. And then, yeah, she just said, I was meant to tell you this with your father, but I'm just going to tell you now, your father and I are getting a divorce. And I smiled for a split second because it was just relief. Like, oh my God, the fighting's finally going to be over. Like, it's finally done. And then I just said, okay, acknowledged what she said. And then she walked back up to the house. And I don't know if she was still looking for Dad or she was looking for you, but she...
Well, I passed her on the way back down to you. I passed Mum and Mum was heading back up to the house. And I straight away thought, oh my God, what's happened now? But when I found you, you were in way better spirits. And I remember thinking, good job, chickens. You did your job, you know.
They did. They worked.
Yeah. Well, because after that, I just wanted to just kind of keep things nice and calm and just keep you happy. So I think we just played card games and things. I think that's all we did, right?
I think so. I think we did too, because I sort of just remember the rest of the night in my head. I felt calmer, I guess.
Yeah, me too.
Like I don't feel like anything else happened.
I think it was actually a good night. I remember having a good time. Nothing really happened after that. Well, I mean, there was one thing. Do you remember the noise that was coming from Mum's bedroom for the rest of the night?
God, yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got a weird mother, right? If you lived in Australia in 2003, chances are that you watched Idol. In its inaugural season, it was the #1 show in the country. And more than that, it was a regular topic of conversation and could not be escaped. The majority of the hype for the show revolved around two contestants, Guy Sebastian and Shannon Knoll. Guy Sebastian was a baby-faced 22-year-old with teased-up hair and a modern style akin to the other pop artists of the time. And with smooth renditions of Prince and Michael Jackson, complete with dance moves, he was a clear favourite to win. Hailing from the rural farming town of Talabijil, Shannon Knoll was seen as a working-class success story. He had a few years on Sebastian, and a more rugged look and style to match, which ingratiated him to the anti-pop movement of the time, and in particular, blue-collar Australians. In fact, his cover of the Jimmy Barnes pub anthem Working Class Man, performed in white sleeveless muscle top and blue jeans, was a clear turning point for Knoll in the competition. And with two fan bases so diametrically opposed, it was no surprise that on the season finale of the show, when Guy Sebastian was voted the winner, there was a backlash. And for months, in pubs and workplaces across the country, passionate voices could be heard proclaiming that Shannon Knoll had been robbed. My mother was one of these voices, and on the day that she finally kicked my father out of the house for good, she celebrated by listening to Shannon Knoll's first hit Australian single, on repeat, and at full volume, a cover of the classic Moving Pictures song, What About Me?
I remember that. I remember it just felt like the CD player was in my room. That's how loud it was.
Well, when I tried to get her to turn it down, it was on full volume. So
because she loved Shannon Knoll.
Yeah, she loved him to an unhealthy level.
When the Idol competition was on, and it was the final two, she had the number to vote for Shannon Knoll beside the phone, and she would periodically make phone calls and kept like a tally next to the phone of how many times she voted for him.
Of course.
And it was at least a good 50 times.
There's something wrong with that. That's a grown woman in love with some gimp on a reality TV show.
She loved him. She told me, she's like, if you walk past the phone and think of it, you can make a call and just add a tally down.
I think I'm going to add that example to the declining phase on my bell curve.
I don't know. It's pretty funny.
When I think back on Mum and Dad's separation, I remember it as a time of gradually increasing tension. The tension was like quicksand, slowly engulfing all of us until we were all neck deep and gasping for air. Obviously, the parents weren't a great match, and the breakup might have been unavoidable. However, I've always felt that Dad was the clear victim. Mum is a difficult lady at the best of times, but in this situation, she was downright evil. For me, it was obvious that her actions were unnecessary and caused the most heartache on not just Dad, but on all of us. This is obvious stuff, right? For over a decade, this was the takeaway from the story. Mum was evil, Dad was the victim. That was, however, until some new information surfaced.
Well, first up, Dad would always say, "When you're ready to hear how I broke up with your mother, let me know, because I will tell you what I did to make sure that she'd never ever want to be with me ever again." And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear any of that shit. And I'm pretty sure he told you what he did.
No, he never told me.
Well, I don't know. So apparently he had told Mum that he cheated on her. And then that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Mum did not want to stay with him after that. And he was proud of that moment. He was proud he did that. He thought he was, like, that was so funny and great of him to win against Mum, I guess.
Dad told Aria that he told Mum that he cheated on her to end their relationship. Did he tell you this too?
Yeah, probably about 6 months to a year after they'd split up, he told me that he broke up with Mum because he had slept with somebody else. And he said, I didn't sleep with anybody else, but that's what I told her. And I was kind of like, why would you say that? Why wouldn't you just say it's not working and break up?
So you said you have confirmed this with Mum. How did that conversation go?
So I was having an argument with Mum about Dad, and she turned to me and she said, "You don't know anything. Imagine for 6 months thinking that you might have AIDS because your father's been sleeping with prostitutes."
A good friend once told me that you'll spend the first half of your life putting your father on a pedestal, and the second half trying to forgive him for not living up to your unrealistic standards. The more time that passes, the more poignant these words become. Was my mother unbearable during the breakup? Of course she was. But was this the result of a broken heart? Probably it was. And if so, did she hide this from us kids to shield us from feeling a similar heartbreak? If this is the case, I've misjudged her for a long time. And that's something that I'm going to have to reconcile with myself. What a horrible time it must have been for her. But what if the worst part is true? What if she had caught him sleeping with prostitutes? Sex work was commonplace in the surfing town. There was even a pub that ran a happy hour for tradies with topless waitresses every Wednesday and Friday night, and it was a well-known fact that these ladies would do a little extra for cash. Was Dad's story about telling Mum he had cheated on her to end the marriage a bit of misinformation to foggy the water and hide his dirty secrets? I don't have the answers. And all I can do is keep trying to forgive a man for not living on a pedestal that I forced him on top of. For a copy of the Declining Phase Bell Curve, check out the link in the description. Next time on Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire, a mythic creature is uncovered. Throughout all of human history, there have been people of infamy. Notorious characters that with just the mention of their name can conjure strong, palpable emotions. Names like Joseph Stalin and Lord Voldemort. Names like these have such power that they are universally recognized across the world, spanning generations. But there are other people of infamy too, ones that aren't quite so well known. These people may not be responsible for genocides, and their crimes may not horrify the masses, but in their time and place, for a select few, they are just as repulsive. Our family has one of these characters, who can still hijack any conversation with just the mere mention of their name, bringing us back to the time when we were under their influence. And who is this person? And how is it that they were able to wield this influence? That, my friends, is the topic of today's episode. The story of Bulldog Face. That's next time on Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire. If you enjoyed today's episode, why not let us know about it with an email to eggshellvampire@gmail.com. That's eggshellvampire@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen. And most importantly, tell your friends about us. We want to be heard. Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire is written, produced, and edited by me, Lucas Shaw. Thanks for listening.